There we go. All right, so I'm gonna get all this stuff going here. Let's get over. It takes just a second to get populated. So, what's the weather like in Champaign, Randy?
It is about 7 degrees.
Ooh,
A balmy 7.
Mm-hmm. Balmy.
oof, that's brutal, man. That is brutal. Did you guys get snow this last little round?
Just a little tiny bit, barely covered the ground.
You stink. We actually, so I saw a weather report this week that said that here in Toledo, we are about 2 feet below our normal snow average. But that's what it's been for the last. That's what it's been for the last several years. It's been below average. So, which I'm attributing that to my prayer.
There you go.
It's totally
Claim it.
It's totally my prayer. Hey, Ken, remember how I told you that it changed the? I figured out how to change the description.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lied.
Oh, no way.
It didn't do it. It said edit description, and I did it. I changed it, but it didn't do it.
That's
So
dumb.
I got to do it manually. So give me just a second here.
Okay.
You gotta love technology.
You do. The I noticed where I put on there just so everybody would know when they click on who this is.
Yeah.
Guest Randy Brown, navigate. But I noticed that it said that it sent that comment to YouTube and Facebook,
Okay.
but not X and the Gram. So I don't know if
Yeah, I don't really know how. I don't know how the gram works. X is weird. It definitely does not go to that. I know that for a fact. And I also tried. Don't judge me on this. So.
Yeah, it says X. It says read only at the bottom.
Yeah. So the Mobilized Church podcast. Don't judge me on this, but we actually have a TikTok account.
Oh Jesus.
So, but we did not get approved. We did not get approved for live streaming on TikTok. So we need all we need.
Well, the Chinese government doesn't want the gospel coming. Hey, Xi Jinping.
Oh no. Oh no.
Sucker.
Here we go. So
coming after you, buddy.
We only need 1,000 followers. That's all we need, and we can go live. So we need everybody to go help us out.
Affect the algorithm.
I'm sure we could probably fake 1,000 followers.
I know.
Okay, just about.
I'm not exactly sure why. Did they get a 75-day extension or something? TikTok.
Man, I don't know what happened with that.
I read something the other day that said that Trump signed an executive order and it was a 75-day extension on the shutdown period. And they gave them the opportunity to meet the demand of selling it off and whatever.
Yeah.
And they said that after the end of the 75 days, it's going to be something like if it doesn't, then it loses its algorithm, but TikTok would remain, which I don't even understand what that even means. But
well, I do know this. So I tried to go on my phone. This is interesting. I tried to go on my phone and add the app just so that I could manage it from my phone. I didn't have to go on my computer.
Yeah.
Did you know that you cannot add the TikTok app?
That's crazy.
You can't add it. So
you can't add it. You just, if you're there, you're still there. I don't know. I mean, they have a Supreme Court ruling that backed up the congressional determination that TikTok is a national threat. And so why it's still going, they're like, you know what, 75 more days. They got all of our national security secrets anyway. Who cares? What are they doing here?
It's an extra 75 days. Ain't no big deal. 75 days, no big deal.
What could they run more in 75 days? Or they leave it open for another 75 days and Elon Musk's team is backdooring it and hacking all the Chinese computers.
Oh,
how cool would that be?
I like it.
They're like, yeah, we'll keep you open.
Sure. You
can't dodge the Doge.
That's right. I did hear that you can sell a phone. So if you've downloaded the app, the TikTok app, they're selling those phones for like hundreds of dollars because you can't add it. What in the world, man?
LIB.
Love me. Oh man. All right.
Also
so
spells lib.
for real. For real.
Hey, look, Ken Bastarkey checking in this
You want
morning.
to give us the Mobilized Church Podcast weather report on the threes? Here's Ken Dillingham.
It's currently 10-13 degrees in Ohio. Chief Meteorologist Ken Bastarkey checking in. Chief Meteorologist Ken Bastarkey says it's 11 degrees with a high of 16 today. The feel-like temperature is -2. Bundle up, Northeast Ohio.
I'm feeling like, bro, if this whole pastoring podcast church thing doesn't work out, I think you got a second career, bro.
I think I may just start moonlighting.
The success rate's super high because you only have to be right 10% of the time. You still have a career.
Bro.
Exactly.
And all you got to do is just hype up every storm. Like, it doesn't matter what just hype it up like it's the worst storm that's ever hit planet Earth.
Yes.
And you get all kinds of followers. So,
Which I evangelized for 12 years.
there you go.
I mean, I don't know what that means. That doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah.
All right. So we got a somebody said the podcast is freezing up. Is anybody else experiencing that? Let us know.
That's your computer. It's Ken Bastarkey. It's Chief Meteorologist Ken Bastarkey in Northeast Ohio. Of course it's freezing.
For real.
That's only appropriate for for our chief meteorologist that it's freezing.
Yeah.
Although we do need some. Let's get some reports back if it is freezing. Let us know.
For real. Sebastian is on YouTube and he's asking, "What are we doing this for?" We ask ourselves that same question every Tuesday.
Good question.
What are we doing this for? Here's the deal, Sebastian. You just hang with us for about another 5 minutes, and you're gonna find out, and you're gonna be so blown away that you're gonna want to join us every Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
Right. It's so good. It's so good. We have to be secretive about it. We're doing this for about 90 minutes every Tuesday. That's all I know.
Big money. That's what we're doing it for. The big
payout. Keep cutting in and out. It's freezing up on Facebook for me. Oh boy.
So maybe it's a Facebook issue. Because I've got it up on Facebook.
And what's it doing?
Like it seems to be fine. So, you know what? We'll just roll with it because it seems it's working fine here, right? So we'll just go here, and I think we'll be good. So, all right, we got pretty good crew jumping on. Man, hey, before we go live, do me a favor, everybody, and just hit the share button. Get the word out. This is going to be a tremendous Ken Bastarkey. See, that's exactly right. You join TikTok, and this is what happens.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Nailed it, bro.
And I called out Xi Jinping.
Yeah, no doubt. We're definitely banned, shadow banned for sure. So before we go live, if you're watching or listening right now, do us a favor and hit the share button. Tell people to jump on. You're going to want to be a part of this conversation. This is going to be a good one. So get that word out there. So it seems
people
like
I think people jumped off of Facebook over to YouTube.
That seems like what's going on.
The numbers just dropped in half over there. So we'll see if it repopulates.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen, y'all ready to go live?
Yep.
Count us down, Big Daddy.
Let's do it. Here we go. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside my big brother, Ken Dillingham, Jr. the third on this brisk February morning. Nice and chilly outside, Ken, but here's the good news. Good weather's coming.
Good weather's coming.
Right?
It's around the corner, right around the corner.
Golf weather is coming. So we're excited about that. Looking forward to that. So we've got with us today, Ken, special third man in the booth. This is going to be a good conversation today.
This guy This guy. I mean, what could we say about him?
There's a lot we could say. There's a lot we could say. So we'll give Randy the official introduction here in just a second, but we do want to just mention, if you're watching live, get the word out. We understand there's maybe a little bit of an issue with Facebook and Instagram, but YouTube is working just fine. So if you're having issues, jump on over to YouTube, and we are monitoring comments. So we definitely want to hear from you today in this conversation. And so, man, we got a good one today, Ken. So why don't we just dive right into this?
Let's roll with it. America First. America First is reminding us that snow weather keeps us alive.
Thank you, America First. Derp. Hey, thank you so much.
Right,
okay.
Right.
Appreciate that powerful commentary.
Yeah. America First in the background has staying alive, derp, 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 staying alive. Thank you, America. Thank you, America First.
We appreciate you joining us today. So
it's actually Donald Trump in his shadow account.
That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Him or Elon. Because they're big supporters of the Mobilized Church podcast,
Bro,
I'm sure.
Doc, let me just tell you.
Big time. All right, here we go. So we are excited today to have with us Randy Brown, who is like a brother to me. We've got a lot of stories we could share, a lot of things. As a matter of fact, Randy, this morning, I'll tell you something. So last night, my wife comes in, she said, I just want to tell you, you do a really good job making the bed. She's like, it's just like, and I said, what do you mean? It's like, it's just always perfect. And the first thing I thought of was the old adage that you always used to say. And it came when I was jackhammering about, I don't know, 50 foot of sidewalk. And everybody kept coming by saying, man, you're doing such a great job.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned a very important principle of praise an idiot and watch him work.
Watch him work. Throw gas on it.
That came from you. So you have impacted my life significantly. So
and your wife as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we go way back. So Randy is the recovery pastor at my home church. It's now called Life Church CU. And we go way back to the beginning days of that church and setting up chairs. And Randy would come behind. You know how OCD I am. Randy would come behind and move the chairs a little bit to make sure that I'd have to put them back in place. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. So he's the recovery pastor at Life Church, but also the founder of Navigation Ministries. Got an amazing ministry and impacting just so many people. So that's kind of the initial introduction, Randy. Why don't you, one of the big things we talk about a lot here is the power of story. So before we get into like all of that stuff, all the ministry things that you're doing, why don't you just share with us your story? You got a powerful testimony, how God found you, the work that he's done in your life, some of the things you've experienced and gone through. So why don't you just give us the kind of the recap of your story and what God's done in your life?
Yeah. Okay. Well, really, I was born in Kankakee, Illinois, was raised in Muhammad, Illinois, a little small town about 12 miles from here, and didn't really have any church background at all, and came from a home that was very, very dysfunctional. My mom would take us to church every once in a while, but really didn't know anything about God. Was raised in a kind of a background where my father was really verbally abusive and kind of ruled with an iron fist, and just a lot of things that were happening in the home that just were very dysfunctional. He would leave every once in a while and get a girlfriend and be gone for months at a time and get an apartment and then show back up, and nobody would ask any questions, just sit down at the breakfast table. So it was like a really very unstable, unsafe, uncertain environment that I was raised in. It was a quarter horse farm, so I was working on a farm and things like that. But the interesting thing was to see the strongholds that developed in my father's life. He was a fairly moral man for quite a long time. I mean, didn't manage his household well, but was a fairly moral man. And then when he started giving in to a lot of desires and different things. He just headed south fast. And so I watched this man go from being a businessman, the vice president of a major bank, and just very successful businessman. And then he started running around hanging in the clubs. He got hooked on cocaine, and he moved us out of the house, divorced my mom, moved a band into the house. And I would go out and visit him, and I would walk into the breakfast table, the dining room table, and I would see the place where we used to sit down and eat breakfast. And like, I remember like the second or third visit I made out there, the whole table was covered in drugs. Like the whole table was covered in drugs, and just kind of standing there absorbing that. And it was weird because it's crazy how our exposure can make very dysfunctional things present as normal eventually.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like it can start to present as normal. And so when I became a little older, my dad approached the only drug dealer we had in our small town. And he said, "Hey, look, if you ever try to give drugs to my kid, I'll kill you." And if you knew him, you'd kind of take him serious. You know, he'd get the job done somehow. So that guy, his name was Agashi, was his name. He said, "Oh, bro, Mr. Brown, I won't try to sell drugs to your kids. We're cool," and everything. And then by the time it turned all around, some of the first drugs and alcohol exposure I got was from my biological dad. Wow. So once all that took a stronghold in his life, then he ended up being the one that originally exposed me to that stuff. So I had an uncle, J.H. Joy, who had founded Lighthouse Ranch for Boys. Yeah. He was my mom's brother. And so he knew we had a lot of problems at home. So there was multiple times he would come by and take me on a fishing trip or take me down to Louisiana to the boys ranch and stuff. And I think he was obviously just trying to reach out and pull me out of the fire and get me saved. But I never did really buy into it until like 1989, and went to a church service in Denham Springs, Louisiana. And man, God just reached me. I mean, he just reached me. And I'll never forget the message that Brother Johnson preached. He said, and I still do tons of hunting and fishing, but he said, you know, when you have more of a desire to fish than go to church, then fishing's become your God. And when you have a desire to hunt more than you do to serve God, then hunting's become your God. And at the time, she's since passed, but I was married to Lisa, my first wife. And it was funny because he's preaching all this stuff about hunting and fishing, and that's your God. And the whole time she's elbowing me, like, you know, we didn't have any church experience, but she's like, "Yeah, that's you, you know," and she's elbowing me. And then like they gave an altar call, and man, I responded to the altar call, and I don't know if it was about repenting or just trying to get away from her elbow, but I went to the altar and gave my life to God on May 28th, 1989. And just everything changed after that. We ended up starting to attend a church in a small town called Sidell, which is Pastor and Sister Rogers, that was their church. And later they came to found the church in Urbana that I'm still in today. And of course, that's Jennifer's mom and dad, your in-laws. And they just discipled me. You know, they just came alongside me, and I had so many issues and so many things. They came alongside me and discipled me. And, you know, God just started to call me into the ministry. And so I started reaching out to the guys that I used to run around with that kept on the same path that I was on. And so I would start reaching out to them. And so I was reaching out to crack addicts and heroin addicts and people that were hooked on drugs, and, you know, just taking them camping, you know, going fishing with them. Eventually, when I started to try to help them with their addiction, the residential piece was kind of, you could see it was important for sobriety. And so they lived in my camper, or they lived in my garage. And that kind of where 30 years ago is where I started working with people with addictions.
Man, that's crazy. It's crazy. You know, that, like you said, the exposure. And I know you shared some stories of the things that you experienced growing up and just kind of how that shaped you, but to watch what, you know, how God brought you out of that and then used that. It's a beautiful thing how God uses those things actually to be the greatest influence.
Right.
Right. I mean, what could have
been
your detriment and destruction actually has been one of the greatest assets. And like you said, you know, of course I had a front row seat, and some of the some of the craziest ministry experiences I've ever had have been the result of like the people you were reaching, and your old buddies that you were reaching, that were just bound by all kinds of addictions and whatever. And so in that kind of early phase, like what's some things that you learned that then kind of paved the way for we'll get into, we'll talk a little bit about Lifeline, we'll talk a little bit about Navigate Ministries, of course, but like what are some things you learned in that early phase that really influenced you as you started working with these guys and recognizing kind of some of the needs and what they were going through and whatever? What's some of the things that you learned in that season?
Well, a lot of it was just I felt like I learned more what not to do than what to do, and a lot of it had to do with I would just bend over backwards to try to help people make it, like just run myself ragged trying to help people make it. And I found out that, because of what God had done in my life, and I knew where God had brought me from, and I could not believe. Every day I woke up not believing that I had the life that I had, just what God had done in my life. Knowing that, I saw potential in everybody. Like you can just see potential in every person that you come across. And so I had to figure out what to do with that. I mean, that's a gift from God to be able to see that kind of potential in people and stuff like that. But so what I was doing that was a mistake is I would match my commitment level to people's potential level. And so whatever potential I saw in them, I would bring my commitment level to help them up to that potential level. And it just made the dynamics was a very unhealthy dynamic, and it became an enabling dynamic and things like that. And so what I learned back then that I didn't even know I was really learning is I learned to match my commitment level to their commitment level. And so just keep mirroring their commitment level. And there's times, where you get out ahead a little bit, maybe give a little bit on credit because we're trying to help people, but that always has to equalize to keep a good, healthy relationship, because, it can't be our commitment that helps people. It's got to be their commitment. And the other thing was like, if I didn't do that, and if I didn't do that, I found out I was ending up with the job I didn't want to have for the rest of my life. And it was a job that I stunk at. And that is, I stink at being God. I make a horrible God. I make a horrible God. And I didn't want to set myself up for that role in their life. So I think that one of the things that I've adopted right now that we kind of try to write into all of our curriculum and tools and everything is I went through a time in my 40s where I had a bunch of repressed memories come back of some things, traumatic events in my childhood. And it threw me into a tailspin, and like there wasn't much help in the church for that. So I ended up seeing 3 secular therapists to kind of get me through all of that. And I noticed that I would have the relief of discovering like why I was having certain emotions and different things manifesting and stuff like that. But I wasn't healing. Like I was like, okay, so it's like going to the doctor and he tells you, oh, you get your coughing because you have bronchitis, but I'd still go home and cough. But it was a relief to know I didn't have lung cancer, So, I mean, it's like the relief knowing what the diagnosis is, but no healing. And so I was walking in our church one day and God said, you're struggling to heal because your cross is falling over. I'm staring at that cross at the front of our church. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You're struggling to heal because your cross is falling over. And I'm like, okay. And I stood there long enough. And then in my mind, the cross stood back up. And the Lord said, because when the cross is standing upright, it's 3 times more vertical than what it is horizontal. And he said, you're trying to get your healing 3 times more horizontal than you are vertically. And so that whole ratio and connection and healing, everything I've tried to target is like, we can't make idols out of curriculum. We can't make idols out of tools.
So good.
Make idols out of processes, because we become dependent on those things. our crosses have fallen over, and we're trying to do all this stuff on a horizontal plane way more than we do vertically. And so everything we do, we need some horizontal things. We need relationships. We need some processes. We need some stuff, but it can get so out of balance because that's what's intuitive to us. We gravitate towards that because we can put our hands on it. But God said we have to stand that up, and everything we do, we've got to be 3 times more vertical than what we are horizontal, and even encourage people in their healing to be 3 times more vertical than what they are horizontal.
Dude, that's so good, man. That's so good.
So you said, you mentioned, and I know there are probably a lot of people that are listening today, and one of the reasons why we do a podcast is not just simply to disseminate information, but it's also to help have a conversation. We say often we have conversations with people, not at them. And so today we're doing our podcast, but it's actually a live recording. And in our podcast, we've got our comments. And I'm not sure if you can see the comments rolling down the side of your page, but some questions today. Love the statement, your redemption story helps inform the conviction God can save anybody. If you've come from a long way away, God can save anybody. If you're a multimillionaire and God reaches you, God could save anybody. It's your story that informs the conviction God can save anybody. I think that's powerful. But you mentioned, and the question is, how do you cultivate commitment in the lives of others? Does it just exist out of hunger, or is it something that can be cultivated?
That's a great question, and I've never had it phrased that way, but I'll try not to teach a whole thing right here, but like commitment, motivation to change, commit to change, all this is stuff that has to happen in order for people to change, and so whether you're talking about addiction or whether you're talking about, for me, addiction's not just drugs and alcohol and pornography. It's, anything we repeat despite its negative consequences, so it can be, everything, absolutely everything. And so
it could be it could be just going into the other room and not engaging because you're afraid it's going to turn into a fight.
Yeah. Or because, we fear intimacy. There's a lot of people that, they fear intimacy because they stink at it, and it's like a pressure. So either they're avoiding a fight or they're avoiding intimacy. They might overgame or whatever, And so, a lot of that stuff becomes a coping behavior. We're doing it for a reason, whether it's any of those things. Right. And so where the commitment thing comes in is like, to commit to change, some things have to happen. And I figured out, you're talking about the things that you figured out. I figured out that it's not my job to get people more committed. Okay. So, if I drop this pencil, what's going to happen? It's going to fall, right? I can do that 10 times. What's it going to do? It's going to fall.
I love the fact that's a carpenter's pencil, by the way.
It is a carpenter's pencil. That's right. So it's going to fall. Well, it's not like God and the angels are up in heaven on the edge of their seat saying, okay, RB's getting ready to drop that pencil. Okay, fall. Okay, he's getting ready to drop that pencil again. Fall. He doesn't do that. I mean, he's the reason why, but he doesn't do that. What God does is he institutes a law that whenever this happens, whenever I let go, things fall. There's the law of gravity that causes that to happen. So, you see God, orchestrating things by a law or a rule or a principle. And then as we make decisions, those principles come into play. And it's not God, well, God made that happen in my life, so I would do this. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. So there's this amazing law of mercy and grace and love that God has in place. And it's called the law of sowing and reaping. What you sow, you shall also likewise reap.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything raise people's commitment level higher than reaping what they sow.
Yeah.
So we talk about sowing seeds, right? We talk about sowing seeds of the word and things like that. And it's always dependent. The success is always dependent on what kind of ground it falls on. I had to get out of the business of preparing the ground because I stink at that. It always ends up looking like criticism and hurtful things when I try to prepare the ground, convincing something that they need help, convincing people that, they need what I have to offer. What we encourage is, look what's going on in your life. Like, here's what's going on in your life, or you're talking to me about what's going on in your life. So that those consequences of sowing and reaping, it's what prepares the ground for people to be able to commit. Because here's the judicial scale. All right. So on this side of the scale, you've got the fear of getting help, the fear of possibly giving up a coping behavior, or the fear of giving up anger, or the fear of giving up a victim mentality. All right. So here's the fear of getting help. Over here is the consequences of life, the consequences of having this negative behavior or mindset or whatever in your life. So until the negative consequences of life outweigh the fear of getting help, nobody gets help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody gets help.
And Randy, one of the things that you're communicating right here is a concept that I've often sort of used in a similar fashion, but communicating that Jesus said, "I'm the way." But then the Bible said there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is destruction. And so what happens is God, in his beautiful mercy and grace, is guiding us into an understanding and revelation. Some of it life just smacks you upside the face and realizes, shoot, that's not the way.
Right.
Right. That things happen, like you said, consequences, results, the results of sowing and reaping. And you go, yeah, that's not the life I want. That's not the way. That's not a better way. And then all of a sudden Jesus is sitting there sort of redirecting and pointing and helping us through our conscious, through people we meet, through whatever, back toward what is the way.
Right.
And it sort of sounds like that's kind of what you're communicating with.
Yeah. And so like in the navigate stuff, like one of the things we use, one of the first lessons, I think it's in volume 2, is like, I can't remember, I'm worst on references, but the ear that hears the reproof of life walks among the wise, right? Mm-hmm. So the ear that hears the reproof of life, the correction that life is trying to bring to you, will eventually walk among the wise. And so in that lesson, I just use the story of Samson and Delilah, and I want to go into the whole big old thing, but life was trying to talk to Samson. First, it was using some people in his life saying, hey, that's not the kind of girl you want to date, blah, 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 blah. But he has his own understanding, and he does things his own way, and he goes and does it. So, I posed the question, like, if you went out on your second date with somebody and like, you go have pizza, and then you're taking a nice little walk in the park. She just kind of, she reaches over and she grabs your hand and she says, honey, she said, what would I have to do to you to make you totally powerless so that people could overtake you? I mean, will we ask her out again? Especially if I went to her place and a bunch of people dove on me and tried to tie me up and hold me captive. We would like cut that off. Samson overrode the inputs of life.
So good.
And he overrode the inputs of life, would not listen to the tutor. When I didn't get it in class, when people were trying to teach it to me, God sends a tutor, which is called life. I had to have tutors in math because I didn't get it during class. Life was also a tutor to me. The experiences of life tutored me that my life wasn't working. Wow. And so we have to have losses sometimes to start to hear life. I had a friend whose dad was blind, my best friend, and he couldn't see anything, but like his sense of hearing and smell was just like heightened. Like I could walk in their house and he, obviously he couldn't see me, but just by the way my feet hit the floor, he'd say, hey, Brown, what's going on? I mean, all of his other senses were awakened. It's so interesting. It really seems like, one of the first things that happened to Samson after he was brought into captivity was they gouged his eyes out, right?
Yeah.
They gouged his eyes out. And I think it wasn't until then that he could start hearing what life was trying to tell him. And I mean, encourage people, hey, I don't want to have those kind of losses in my life before I start to hear what life is trying to tell me.
Yeah. And that's such a great point. I want to point out one of the things I love, and hopefully we'll get to it in the conversation, but you're a master disciple maker. I still use the story of when we did outreach and I knocked like the entire neighborhood and you got to one house because you were asking questions and building relationship, whatever. Like the discipleship piece is really so important. And I think there's a couple things that people need to get from this. I think they need to hear that. I think it's so important what you said about, one of the things I learned from you is relapse is a part of recovery. And I think, a lot of this stuff is in line perfectly with discipleship. And one of the worst things that we often do in trying to help people come to Jesus is we anesthetize that pain of life that you're talking about, the decisions that they're making. We do everything we can to anesthetize that. And what you just said is so powerful. That's God's educator. That's God's teacher. That's his way.
His mercy and grace.
His mercy and grace. Absolutely. The other thing too, real quick, is one of the things I learned. So years ago, I went to the training, back home, and at that time, we were having a lot of people here at the church. We're dealing with a lot of people with addictions. And so I thought I was going to get training on how to help people get out of their addictions. One of the things you said is like it's not super difficult to help people stop doing drugs if you put the right things in place. Like you can help that. But the thing that I learned the most is we oftentimes highlight those addictions because there's such strong ramifications, like such evident, evidence fruit of that. Yeah. But the reality is, man, I had an epiphany sitting there in one of the breakout sessions with the guy, and I'll be careful how I say this, but the dude like had it all. If you look at him, good looking guy, money, like all the things. But then he started sharing about like sexual addiction things and how it was destroying his life. And man, I had an epiphany in that training of like, dude, what we're dealing with is everybody develops some form of dysfunctional behavior to deal with the things of life that we're going through and working through. So I want people to understand when we're talking today, there's emphasis. And like you said, you've worked with addictions for a long time, but we're not just talking about like chemical addictions. We're talking about all of those dysfunctional things that have replaced the ways of Jesus, the way that seems right to a man. It seems right to us because that's what we've become used to. And that's how we've coped with things. But Jesus has the better way. Yeah. I want to make sure people get that. They understand we're not just talking about chemical addiction today.
No. And I mean, why do we do the things we don't want to do? I mean, getting to the root of why we do the things we don't want to do and why, dealing with the emotions that we really shouldn't be feeling or don't want to feel. And I'm not talking about dodging reality, but like, sometimes we're generating negative emotions out of false beliefs and lies and vows that we've adopted as we've gone through life. And the cool thing that Suzanne and I are experiencing as we do trainings is it's just like, what your experience when you went there is, a church will have us come in and work with their leadership, and maybe several churches will come together and they'll send their leadership to a training, and they think they're there just to learn how to help people that, need help. And then 3/4 of them got tears running down their face, and God's just remodeling things in their own lives, that he wants to touch, and that's been one of the really cool things is that's been God's door, for this ministry is that, addictions is why people always want to have us come, but then they find out that the whole church needs emotional wellness.
Hey, Randy, let me ask you a crazy question. This is like Bible quizzing. This is a 4-part cross-reference.
Let me find my buzzer.
This is a 30.4-part cross-reference question. Ready? Question. How much of the journey is removing the habitual temptation? How much is learning to despise the habit, the whatever, right?
Coping behavior,
dysfunction, yeah. Right. How much of it is healing from the stuff that caused you to go that direction, and how much of it is transformation so that it doesn't dominate you anymore?
I don't know about the exact ratios. Tell me number 2 of the two-part
So
question.
the first one is how much of, okay, let's maybe take them one by one. How much of the journey is about just removing the habitual temptation out of your life? And like you said,
Sobriety.
You put people in your, you said you put people into your garage. You put people in,
Right.
like it sounded like what you were doing was saying, I have to, like okay, in my head, and like click, straighten me up if I'm off base in the reason why you have a residential treatment center is part. Okay, I hate to say this, but this is not my expertise. And so I'm just assuming here that you're taking someone and saying, first thing we got to do is get them out of it. We got to get them out of the environment. Is that true? Or am I
100%? No, you're 100% it. And that's why the residential piece became so crucial, is because periods of abstinence. All right. So, and it's not that a person has to long-term be totally abstinent, like from anger, or totally abstinent from gaming or whatever. But so what's happening, and I won't go too far into it, but what the brain does synaptically is whatever fires together wires together. Okay. So like, a person that's experiencing stress and anxiety, that's firing. And then all of a sudden they find out if they play, some video game for 2 hours, that they feel released from that stress or that anxiety. And so those two things happen together, like, or let's say smoking, they smoke a couple cigarettes and nicotine and all that happens and it releases the stress or whatever. So stress and the relief from nicotine, when they fire together, synaptically, they wire together. Wow. And so that happens over a period of, when it fires together, it wires together. Yeah. And so over a period of time, those wirings develop a neural pathway. And so the longer that happens, the deeper the neural pathway goes. So if you can imagine like a big mountain and there's a stream going down the mountain and you're at the top of the mountain and you throw the beach ball in the stream and it's beach ball's floating down the river or whatever, and you want to get the beach ball at the bottom of the mountain, where are you going to wait? Right? Yeah. Where the stream's at. You're not going to wait over here on the other side of the mountain because the beach ball is going to show up. That's what a neural pathway looks like. So like a neural pathway is, it can become so deeply entrenched that when a person has this trigger, this is what they do. Right. And so part of the process, so there's things, and there's somebody out there that can answer this question, and they'll probably correct me on your screen and not mine. But it's like, there's this protein that's either applied to the connection or denied the connection that either breaks the connection or makes the connection. Yeah. And
when you come into truth, your body releases a hormone that cleaves that long strand protein and breaks down the.
But come into truth is experience truth, not just hear it preached.
Right. Exactly.
Because the brain is not rewired by hearing things. The limbic brain does not learn by talking. It's the things you guys are talking about. It's relational experiences. It's relationships that break us. Okay. So it takes new relationships to fix us. The only problem is the thing that we need the most is also the thing we're the most afraid of, because that's what wounded us to begin with.
And here's what's so crazy. Literally this morning, this is so crazy. Literally this morning, I sent an article that I've been doing some research. There's a book called The Talent Code. Some stuff that I've been studying. The Huberman Lab. Dr. Jordan Peterson was on there. I literally sent Chris an article that I've been working on. Why it's so hard sometimes to get people missionally activated. And we've been talking about liminality, and it's like there's some, but what's so funny is I literally did a section on what you're talking about in what's so when you like what I literally used the phrase what fires together wires together. And one of the things that I mentioned was that dopamine triggers epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and adrenaline intensifies the myelin in the brain, which wraps around that neuropath and insulates it. And the more it's insulated, it's like a wire or whatever, that there's
Protected.
there's less and less influence that comes against that neural pathway. And so something that's been wrapped with myelin is, so to me, this is one of the things, whether, and this sounds really crazy, but whether you're talking about a Christian that's addicted to a consumeristic, comfortable Christian life, who you're trying to get them out of the pew and get them into the mission field, and they're like, that's really scary, or a person that's coming out of an addictive behavior and a life of coping and says that's really scary. Either way, it's that myelin that's wrapping around that's causing them to almost refuse to allow that neuro pathway to be compromised.
Exactly. Right. The brain makes it, to varying degrees, the limbic brain will make it a survival need. That's why it insulates it and protects it. That's why it's so hard to get people to adopt other things, because that becomes their lane of protection or comfortableness or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a survival need. Yeah.
You come against that which gives a person identity. You come against that which gives a person peace. Whatever that they're like, yeah, but my life has been so crappy that this is the only thing that's given me any kind of escape. And so you're wondering, but don't you see how it's just messed you up? Like, don't you see? But here's the deal, though. But it's like, yeah, but what I came from messed me up. It's hard, isn't it?
It is hard, and I mean. And one of the key questions is when they start describing that to you, you just let them describe all of that. And this is why I do this, and then I do this, and why I do this. And, there's a reason why they're having that conversation with you to begin with. So the great question is, how's that working out for you?
Right.
Yeah.
How's that working out for you? Where it's working good. I'm like, oh man, that's great. Let's get some Starbucks. Right. Because until they think that's not working out for them, the rest of that is like, I'm not going to shove the IV in your arm and make you take it.
Which, by the way, what you're saying, comment, ready, listen, comment. Can we say that our commitment to change is proportional to our recognition of how much what has caused the brokenness is not the way? Could we say that our commitment to change is proportional to our recognition of our realization of what has caused the brokenness is not the way? In other words, does a person have a commitment to change based upon their ability to say, look, like you said, how's that working out for you? And a person's like, yeah, it's not working out. And
well, it's making that connection and then connecting those experiences. Like what you'll see in working with a lot of people is they'll adopt a victim mentality. Okay. Mm-hmm. So one thing you'll never help is a victim. Just forget it, give up on it. You won't help a victim until you're able to coach them out of a victim mentality, because a victim always says it's somebody else's problem. It's my dad did this to me, my mom did that to me, my brother got more Cheerios than I did, blah, 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 and so, but when a person makes the connection like you're talking about and say, okay, here's cause and effect, this is, even though I didn't ask to be abused, it's my pain now, they're not going to fix it, I'm going to own it. And then you can start working with people that are willing to take that step. But it's like, there's cues. Like we if we watch cues and get people in touch with the cues. And so, I mean, I remember how I learned this lesson. I mean, it wasn't a very pretty way to learn this lesson. I felt like I kind of learned it before, but how this lesson was just like stamped into my DNA was, I was married for 31 years prior to Suzanne. I was married to a lady named Lisa. And I was married to her for 31 years, and she was 49 years old. I was just a couple years from retirement. And we were, had all kinds of plans, thought we knew everything was going to happen in life and all of that. And then 49 years old, she had her gallbladder out. And then they said it was cancerous. And they said that she was going to be gone in 4 to 6 months. Okay. And so it's that walk through all of that. And she was in a lot of pain, like a lot of pain. And the pain was so great that she would cry out and all the things. That it was so bad that the people that lived across the street from us came over and asked us what was going on at our house. That's how bad it was. And so there was many, many nights, where I remember this one particular night was like a lot of others, and nothing would take the pain away. And she would only weigh like 90 pounds, and we were standing in the kitchen, and she had her fingers laced together, and she was hanging around my neck and just hanging there, and she was in a lot of pain. She was going, "Randy, pray for me, pray for me, pray for me." I go, "I am praying for you, Lisa. I am praying for you." And then she'd cry out, and she'd say, "Daddy, Daddy," talking to God, "Daddy, I'm your daughter. I'm your daughter. Please take this pain away. Please take this pain away. God, please take this pain away." And then she'd say, "Randy, he's not taken away. Pray some more. Pray some more." I'm just standing there like in anguish because Lisa's in a lot of pain. I can't do anything about it. And I'm just like, God, what are we supposed to do? And in that moment, this still small voice said, "Randy, I'm not taking it away because this pain is a gift to you." And I sat there for a minute, and I'm like, I'm waiting for an explanation. And he said,
God, the moment you want God to be an end giver.
Yeah, exactly. "This pain is a gift to you." And I'm like, okay. And he said, what this pain is doing, it's a prompt. This pain is helping Lisa let go of her life there so that she can come and be with me. And this pain is helping you let go of her so that she can come and be with me. And so pain and discomfort is always a cue to let go of something, like grabbing a hot pan. You don't have to talk somebody into letting go of a hot pan, right? So the pain levels go up, and then the willingness to let go increases. So, talking the scale, the law of sowing and reaping, that's why most of the time when we're trying to help somebody, we got to help the family or I have to help the pastor. A lot of times I have to help the pastor because they're enablers, right? They don't think they're enablers. They're just trying to help, but they're enablers. So remember, the consequences of life had to outweigh the fear of getting help. Well, God's got this law that's going to make that happen. And we got all these people that think they're trying to help, taking all the weights off of this side of the scale, bailing them out, soothe them over. Like you said, "Oh, it's okay. It's going to be all right. You can find another wife, whatever." It's like we're trying to take all the weights off of this side of the scale, the consequences that God's law of sowing and reaping put there. And we're hindering God's process of mercy from preparing the soil so they can receive the seeds of help.
And Randy, pastors by nature are either by expectation or by gifting. Right? Either by expectation or gifting. I'm not a pastor by gifting. I'm just a pastor because it's a learned behavior because of the expectation of what a pastor should be and do. But pastors by nature are shepherds. And that means to keep them safe and protected and happy and whatever, right? Like the whole idea. And that's like a lot of reason why people don't transform.
But so are parents.
Right. Yeah. Right. Anybody who loves somebody else. Yeah.
And you see that, they become enablers, which actually ends up, producing the outcome that you don't want because they're anesthetizing that and they're helping people get away from that. I'll just mention this real quick, and I think we can find it. I'll see if we can find it in our archives. But man, one of the greatest messages when Randy came and preached, "The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of," right? Is that the right title?
Yeah.
Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. Man, it's such a powerful sermon. I'll see if I can find it. If I can, I'll post the link to that. Man, it was such an impactful, powerful message. One of the things I don't want to jump off of this, but I do want to highlight something and maybe kind of address this because we see it. And again, one of the reasons we want to have you on was because man, just this is such amazing, powerful stuff, and it's so needed because again, people are dealing with not necessarily maybe dysfunctions that are having them strung out on the streets, but we have people sitting in our church pews, Randy, that are sitting in our church pews that are not whole, that are going to other things, thinking, like you said, what fires together, wires together, things that they think are going to bring them peace and comfort because there's that connection there, and they miss out on that wholeness piece. And so again, I just want to keep going back to that and hammering in on that. But one of the things I do want to maybe have you address, there was a question, our buddy Jay Emmerich had a question about relationships. And I think this is such an important piece, because one of the things we know is one of the byproducts of dysfunction is isolationism. right?
Mhm.
It drives people to isolationism. So his question was, how do we reconcile the need for meaningful relationships with the reality that past relationships have caused deep hurt? Maybe do this. Maybe talk to us about why isolation is so detrimental, and why, but yet it's so detrimental, but yet it seems to be the reflex for so many people that are in dysfunction. And how do we get past that? How do we see the need? This is why we say discipleship is so important, because so many people have walked this journey with God. Yeah, they go to church with people, they hear sermons, but they're not really in relationship with people. They're just connected to them, socially or whatever. Relationship is such an important piece of recovery, of our growth in
Intimacy.
intimacy. So talk to us about that.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why that lack of intimacy, and intimacy obviously isn't anything physical, but it's sharing of your heart, being real and being known and being loved for what people know. And as that exchanges, we are God designed us for intimacy with him and others. Okay. And so that's when we're walking in our purpose, is when we're intimate with God and with others, that connection. I mean, that's what Calvary was all about, is what was restoring a connection to God, a relationship with God. And so, like I said before, it's in connective relationships that we become wounded in life, right? We become hurt in life. And so we do have to get our healing through new experiences. And man, I'd love at some point to readdress all of your questions, because that you had in that
Oh, yeah.
3-part question. Number one, I could use the 20 points that you were going to give if I hit the buzzer and got it. But number 2, it's just really, really good stuff. But so everything, and I mean, I don't overemphasize like Satan and whatever, but he understands this principle. He understands this principle that you guys are fighting for. And this is the way I describe it. It's like, Israel was coming against the Philistines, and they send out Goliath, right? And so Goliath's parading around back there, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And he's saying, give me a man. All right. He says, give me a man. And he says, give me a man. And every time I've read that story, I always wondered why does he get to decide? Let's just a whole bunch of us jump up and go kick his butt, because, we can do it. Like all of us can get up and just go, take it to him. Yeah. And so what I learned from that is, if we allow the devil to proclaim the terms of battle, he will always win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Goliath was isolating, he was trying to isolate one person out of the army and make it between him and that one guy. So Ken's a lot bigger than me. Like, Ken is a lot bigger than I am. But you know what? If you allow me to name the terms of battle, I will win. You can take the most formidable warrior. If you allow me to name the terms of battle, okay, I get an AR-15 and you get a fly swatter, right? I mean, if you allow me to name the terms of battle, I will always win. And when we allow the devil to isolate us one-on-one, and we isolate with our wounds, we will always lose. Mm-hmm. And so, all recovery begins as we start to learn to trust again. And and so it's when we start moving back towards trust. And we have a tool that we use, I was talking to you about the other day, called Leper Steps. And one of the more powerful ways to use it is in learning how to trust again, the steps you would take back. And it uses, the lepers, the story of the lepers. And like, they knew if they stayed there, they were going to die. If we stay here, we're going to die. But it felt like if they moved towards the Syrian camp, it felt like they were going to die, right? One was a reality, one was a perception. All right. But when they took steps towards the thing they were afraid of, God came alongside of them, and instead of finding what would destroy them, they found what they really needed to live. They found turkey legs and gold and garments and everything else. They were afraid to go. And it's the same way when somebody's learning to trust again. In the tool, they take several steps, and you can learn it for any kind of a lose-lose situation people think they're in. But like with trust, okay, what would be a first step to trust? Well, I think you might already be having it. We're having a conversation about it. So let's write down your first step. You've already taken it. And then you help them take some more steps towards trusting, hold them accountable of when they're going to take those steps. And when you get them walking towards the thing that they're afraid of, this is the new experiences, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
So we help them have new experiences, and experiences is the only thing that will rewire the limbic brain. Okay, so those connections are broken with the isolation piece. We're going to stay right here, and new connections are made as they have new experiences, and then God comes alongside them, and instead of being destroyed, they find exactly what they need to live.
Man,
Randy, can I share something crazy with you?
Yeah.
Doctor, so Chris and I we're doing a podcast at Winter Fire this weekend. It's a live recording of our podcast, and we're doing it at Winter Fire. And one of the things that we're doing it is talking about having conversations with people, not at them, and the power of storytelling. Listen to this. And I just want to highlight this because this is sort of threaded into just about everything that you've done today, from the way you've approached communicating the information, the way you've answered questions, and the way that you've sort of highlighted what the answer is. I want you to hear this. So talking about the science of storytelling, how it opens up the heart and mind. Stories don't fight with people's belief. They invite people into a shared experience. Here's why. Because it leverages oxytocin, which is the empathy hormone. Listen to this. Dr. Paul Zach's research revealed that emotionally engaging stories release oxytocin, a hormone that builds trust and empathy. In one study, participants who heard a compelling narrative about a father and his sick child showed increased oxytocin levels. These participants then became more generous and compassionate than those who received only the facts. And I could go on and on about the brain's sensory, emotional. So the data, okay, so what the data says is, that when you give people the information, it basically triggers a part of your brain, the sort of your prefrontal cortex, which deals so deeply with data, information, whatever, which then triggers fight or flight because it's the response to the amygdala. Right. I know you know all this stuff, right? But so what happens is as long as the conversation continues to happen in the prefrontal cortex, it's happening in that part of the brain, which causes people to alert their defense system, to argue, to debate with you, whatever. Storytelling opens up 4 different regions of the brain. It releases oxytocin, and it's been proven over and over and over that storytelling literally opens a person up, and they call this neural coupling.
Yeah.
I think this goes with Jay's question, by the way.
It does.
It creates neural coupling where literally the same places in the storyteller's brain that lights up is the same areas in the story listener's brain that lights up. They literally synchronize, their brains synchronize in storytelling. And yet we've used for so many years, raw data and empirical stuff. And here's what, so on and so forth. But what you've done today over and over is to show and demonstrate the power of storytelling that brings a person into your fix to the problem, your solution.
Right. And so if you can imagine all what you just said there, like 100%, that's what's going on. But if you can imagine why you're telling your story to a person that has negative memories and experiences that keep them in that, the insulated situation you were talking about, that insulation. So as we're telling the story and they're empathizing and those chemicals, what it's doing is it's melting the insulation off of that. It's melting it's melting what's protecting that neural pathway, that what we would call a stronghold. It's a stronghold. It's a vow that a person said, I'm never going to trust again because I'm going to get hurt. I'm not going to do this again because I'm going to get some life vow. That's what's been insulated, because it was an adaptive behavior that eventually became maladaptive, or we wouldn't be talking about.
Amen.
Right.
Which by the way, myelin is 85% made of cholesterol. So
yeah,
it can be penetrated.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Twinkies healed us, and I knew that's probably what this was. But I can feel healing as soon as I eat one. So if you imagine, just imagine this, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily right, but I wouldn't be saying it if I didn't think I was right. So once through the storytelling and all the stuff you talked about starts to melt away, that protective covering over that stronghold or that false belief or whatever, what if they were able to venture out into and stretch into a different experience? So they have a different experience. So then all of a sudden, the brain always rewards or always repeats whatever's rewarded. Just that's how it got in the bad spot. You know, it was rewarded by a sense of protection. That's how you ended up with all that insulation, all that other stuff. But you melt that away, and then they go have a new experience, right? So it's like they have a new experience, and they have a positive result, right? So they break the connection with nicotine. And this is like oversimplification. They break the connection with nicotine, that starts to dissolve, and then they start to connect with community, and they start talking about their adventure, all that other stuff. So then all of a sudden, then the reward is connected to that behavior. Guess what? They've developed a new neural pathway that can be just as influential as the negative one. The Bible calls that we're transformed what? By the renewing of our mind. Right?
So good.
I think you just answered the 4-part question.
That's what I was going to say. Like that. I think it leads to it. I think it's a great question about, you know, transformation and all of that kind of stuff, because as Pentecostals, we tend to lean heavily on, you know, just one spiritual experience to change us and whatever. So
the Pentecostal fairy dust theory.
Maybe true, man.
Maybe talk about that. Like, what is the the harmonization of what you just talked about? You know, don't be conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What you just said, those neural pathways are recreated, and the bond, what you just said is so powerful. The bond of the good stuff is just as strong as the bad. Like, and so if you can
just as necessary, right?
Right.
That's why abstinence alone, just like programming and things, and I'm not going to name any types of programs, but just things that build abstinence, that's only part of the process. Abstinence is just the space to heal, because you have to have abstinence to break those connections. But if you're not connecting to something else that's
so
of God,
powerful,
then you'll pick up something else. We call that a crossover addiction. You know, and that's why you might have somebody that doesn't shoot crack anymore, but they teach 700 Bible studies a week, and it's destroying their family.
Why? Shooey.
Substitute.
Right,
Substance,
it's a crossover.
substance,
We see it so much.
Right.
So much. And because it's viewed as positive, then it's overlooked. Must be fine.
That's why heroin addicts are blessed, because nobody can say, well, I just use heroin socially. I just get together with family and we do heroin on Thanksgiving. You know, you can't turn that into a good thing, but you can make teaching a bunch of Bible studies a good thing, even though, you know, they don't get to put their kids to bed, even though they're not bonding with their family like they should, even though they're stressed out, even though they don't have anything left to give their family, even though. And I'm not against teaching Bible studies, but anything we repeat, despite its negative consequences, has become an addiction. And it's filled some other thing. It's like it's taking the place of some other thing.
Crystal meth is actually one of the strongest triggers of dopamine in our, like people that do crystal meth are actually dopamine addicts.
1,200 units in a single dose.
It's unbelievable.
Compared to like 250 units in food or sex. Like
yeah. That's right. So that's what I started to say.
Crazy.
It's 5 to 6 times more powerful jolt of dopamine than the best sex you've ever had.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
So
it's unbelievable.
It explains why people give up relationships and even food and sex or whatever to chase meth. Why? Because, you know, they're gonna go for the extra 900 units of dopamine over that. So there's that much more reward. So the brain will gravitate towards the greater reward.
Well, Dr. Jordan Peterson in the Huberman Lab podcast, Jordan Peterson was saying they were talking about this because Huberman's a neuroscientist, and at Stanford. And one of the things that Jordan Peterson was talking about was he said, if all you have is proximal goals, so he's speaking from a sort of psychological perspective. If all you have is proximal goals, he said, the closer you get to your target, the more you get, what's it called? Like myopic, but what's that called when your vision,
Tunnel vision.
tunnel vision. The more you get tunnel vision, and he said, and the faster you go, the closer you feel like you're. And so he's talking about proximal targets. So what he said was, which basically intensifies your determination. And so he said, that's why people that he said, so like he made the statement, he said a person who's a cocaine addict, he said, or a person who's a crystal meth addict, he said, what happens is they start getting tunnel vision. And he said, and every experience in their life becomes a tool to get more cocaine. And he said, which is why he literally said this. He said, when I realized that God, who made our brains, challenges every person out of proximal tunnel vision by giving them a distal vision, up and away, beyond. Abraham, I'm going to take you to a place. I'm going to make you a great nation.
That I will show you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he said, when I began to realize that literally God is flexing the neurological structures that he's given us in real life ways to move us into healthiness by faith, he said, is when I became a believer.
The key word was move us. To me, that's the key word. That's the experiential word, move us, because no matter what you're talking about, the limbic brain, the survival brain, the reptilian brain, whatever you want to call that, it's experiential. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I cut my fingers off, my brain recorded the sights, the smells, the sounds, and whatever. So the limbic brain is about avoidance, right? To try to keep you from experiencing that pain or that threat again. So whenever things would present that would simulate, that experience, it's going to be one of those three responses, like fight, flight, and numb.
Adrenaline. Actually, what you're talking about is adrenaline is literally the hormone that causes that process that you're talking about to blaze it into your memory, to make your mind focus more, to remember all these details.
It's a survival need. And that's what you're talking about with that and cocaine, because cocaine, the brain is convinced that cocaine, because it pushed away the unwanted thoughts, feelings, and memories, cocaine becomes a survival need in the limbic brain. And it becomes very experiential, because when I'm using coke, I don't think about this. I don't have this memory. Right. I'm not experiencing this trauma. So that becomes so deeply entrenched that that's where we get the disease of addiction, is because it's not, hey, I don't want to say no to it. It's just my brain says yes. Okay. So it's so deeply entrenched.
Wait, hold on. Pause you right there. So neurologically, it is an answer, but experientially, it is a destroyer.
So this is what I was driving at, is like, so when the limbic brain only learns by experience, right? It's only experience. And the crazy thing about it is the limbic brain does not distinguish between physical pain and emotional pain.
Correct.
It can't tell the difference.
Correct.
So the fear of being betrayed again is experienced just like getting your fingers cut off, right?
Correct.
And so that being the case, it's experiential. So we can, and I'm not
wait. The reverse of pain is the cue to let go.
Right.
So you could say, in a negative sense, it's let go of those relationships, let go of that. Right. So pain can like you. So this is one of the, so what you're, okay. Help me, 'cause I'm learning here. Okay. I want you to help me learn. So what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that the limbic system only learns through experience. And the reason why is because pain is amoral. Pain is not associated to a physical experience or an emotion. The brain doesn't discern that. Only can we discern that through experience.
Right. So like telling our story, like I 100% agree with that, but it's when that story then when that story compels somebody to try something different,
Experience it.
and it's the experience that changes that. Because we can talk all we want to the limbic brain. The prefrontal cortex will be giving us the nod. Oh yeah. The limbic brain, the limbic brain's going like,
Prefrontal cortex is like,
right.
Prefrontal cortex is like, I agree. The prefrontal cortex is sitting in the pew, amening.
Right.
And the limbic system goes, yeah. But when I leave, I'll go right back.
Well, not even that, like the limbic brain. So like when we're teaching, it doesn't even comprehend it. The limbic brain hears Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah,
That's
wah,
right. Yeah.
wah, 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 because, that's why you have 30-minute hour conversations with people that have destructive coping behaviors. And 5 minutes after you've had that conversation with them, they go do the exact same thing because it's the limbic brain is overriding logic. It's overriding morals. It's overriding things of value, because if the building's on fire and your survival need is to find the exit and get out of the fire, you don't care how many little old ladies you run over to get there, you're going to exit the building. And that's what the limbic brain is doing. So until that is rewired, and those are the kind of responses it's going to have. Either rewired or like it doesn't need to happen. Like, in other words, on the side of healing, it's like the side of healing is like, this isn't an emergency, right? This is not what you experienced before. And then, like in Navigate, one of the lessons I use is called the what ifs. And the what ifs is like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm talking too much or what, but I mean, it's like,
you're good.
Are you saying like moral transformation? Like you receive sort of like a moral transformation, like you begin to realize that there's like a new set, like for example, Jesus said, take no thought for what you'll eat, what you'll wear. So I'm like, so let me, because I'm trying to make, man, my brain, this is the beauty.
Well, that would be hard for somebody to embrace. That'd be hard for somebody to embrace that as a kid would open the refrigerator all the time and all they saw was mustard, right? And to a kid that, nobody, they didn't have any clothes or nobody got them ready for school or whatever. And that kid took a life vow that if I'm going to be taken care of, I got to do it myself, right?
Yeah.
And so then we bring them into Christendom and say, hey, look, God's got all your needs met, right?
Okay, but that's what I'm saying.
They have to override that life vow. Exactly. I'm
forcing so what happens? So what you're saying is right. Okay, so I'm going into now. I'm stepping into, because what you're talking about, I've literally studied sort of the neurological piece of what you're talking about. I've never been really deeply embedded, although I want to, so sort of like addiction recovery, that kind of space. But what I'm doing is you're helping me make a connection, connect the dots between sort of like practical theology and missiology, where you're saying, look, you say to a person, take no thought. Jesus said, take no thought for what you'll wear, what you'll eat, where you'll live. For your Father in heaven knows that you have need of these things. And like the very fact that we've communicated that we've told somebody that is gonna be like, oh, okay. And like, we know that it doesn't happen that way. And yet for some strange, crazy reason, we've actually tried to convince ourselves that, oh yes, it does, because faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of the Lord, and the power of God's word is just going to make that thing happen. And you're like, you're an idiot. I mean, a sanctified idiot, but
yeah.
It
takes the doing. No, it takes the experience that follows the truth.
Yeah.
So it takes the experience that follows the truth. And that's why everything we do in Navigate, we're trying to create new experiences, because we've been throwing truth at people for a long time. But until they stretch into, like, that tension moves them into a new experience, they don't change. Yeah. They don't change. Why? Because they're still coping with the same wounds and things that they were originally coping with. When we get healing, we trust God, but what about all the trust that was broken with a biological father? A lot of times it's hard to move into that until there's healing for that version of them, right? Until there's healing for that version of them. I struggled I struggled with connecting with God's unconditional love. We become very performance based, right? We feel good when our sermons go well and people are responding to this, and people are getting baptized and the church is growing, all this other stuff. But when all that goes in the tank, our identity is connected to our performance a lot, right? Well, for me, I came up in a very performance-based household with my biological father. He never even showed up until I started wrestling and playing football. I never even saw him hardly until I started playing football and wrestled. But all of a sudden he started showing up. So my heart fired. Okay, I perform well. My biological dad shows up. So those two things wire together, and I get the false belief I am my performance. Okay, so I carry that into a relationship with God, and God's got, remember those old printer connections that had pins in it? Like we used to plug our printers into our computers. They had all those pins. Every once in a while, you'd bend the pins in the connector, and then you'd have to jack around with them forever so that they would go together. So the pins in my connector got bent by my relationship with my biological father, all right? So love was conditional for me. If you perform well, I'll love you, I'll accept you, I'll validate you. If I lost a wrestling match, he wouldn't talk to me for 3 or 4 days, right? So what happens is we bring people in and we try to connect them to unconditional love. They don't have a connector for it.
Yeah.
Until we help them heal from the wound of conditional love.
Yeah, they're still seeing mustard in the fridge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like
one of the things like I think is really insidious right now that I'm seeing a lot, we're dealing with a lot, is people coming in and weed has been promoted as the thing that like keeps you from like the anxiety piece, right?
Yeah.
And so you get people that have an experience with God and then they're like, okay, I'm going to stop doing this. And then all of a sudden, man, they get confronted with all the issues of life and the pressures and going to work. And
I can't go to the grocery store without.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's become their mechanism. And we're just like, man, no, you just need to do it. God's going to help you get through this. He's going to do whatever. And somehow we've got to help them get connected to the experience, which a lot of what I'm hearing today is a lot of what, we call fruit to root, right? Which,
I was just going to say that, Chris.
And I got another way of saying that. So
addiction is really just a fruit. What we've got to become better at is discerning what the root is and not just helping them get the root out, but replacing the corrupted root with the better root of Jesus by doing life Jesus's way. So those experiences they see through experience that the truth is right, but I've also experienced it. So now they're wired together that when I do things Jesus's way, it may not always turn out like I know if I'm going to smoke weed, I'm going to get elevated above my problems. I'll have to think about all that stuff for a minute, whatever. And so there's an immediate impact. That's the hard part, I think, sometimes with faith is you don't always see the immediate impact.
Because it's literal change. Well, it's change. And so you're going to have some people that have the resiliency to push through like, okay, I'm just going to do the hard right things and I'm going to behave my way out of this situation with the help of God. And that's why we see some people that do okay. The larger majority is we have to help them heal so that they can do that. In other words, like that's the advantage. That's the key to all of this. We want to build the big base pyramid in our churches. I heard you guys talk about scorecard. Well, the scorecard's not how many people show up Sunday. It's how many people pass through those pearly gates whenever the rapture happens. That's the real scorecard. So it doesn't matter if they're sitting on our pews, if they're going to burn in hell anyway. So, I mean, it's like, and the more wounds we have, the less chance we have of making it. Because those wounds will help me. Those wounds will cause me to buck up against authority. And those wounds will move me into isolation because we think everybody's offending us. Or those wounds, Satan grabs a hold of those wounds as handles to manipulate us through our wounding. So I have this illustration in my head, and it's like, two things, if I can say just two things. It's like when my kids were little, my kids would be in the back seat and they say, "Hey, Dad, tell us a story." And like, I've done a lot of things, man. I don't want to make up a story. It's like, that's exhausting, like to make up a story from scratch. And so we'd be riding in the car and I said, okay, I'll tell you a story. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story. And it's about a man named Jed. He was a poor mountaineer and he barely kept his family fed. It's like the
Right.
Jed Clampett. I just told him the
Yeah.
Jed Clampett
Powerful.
story, and you
Powerful.
get to the point where then one day he was shooting at some food,
Shoot for some
and
food.
up to the
Yeah.
ground from a
Bubbling
bubbling crude.
Come on, black
Right, so
gold,
that's
baby.
powerful, isn't it? Texas
Yeah.
tea. So in
Texas
other
tea.
words, so here's the deal: we want to be efficient, we want to be effective. So when Jed called for the drilling company, where do you think he drilled? Where it bubbled up out of the ground. He ain't gonna go
Where
on
he
the
shot.
other side of the property. Yeah, he's gonna
Where he
go
shot.
where the stuff's bubbling out the ground. So the methodology is follow the bubbles. All right. So if you have a hole in your tire and you can't find the hole, you put it underwater,
Mm-hmm.
and the bubbles will find their way to
Yeah.
the surface.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
put your
Squirt
hand
some
over the
soap on it.
bubbles. Yeah. Well, just even underwater, you put your hands over the bubbles, they'll eventually fill up your hands, pour out the side of your hands, and hit the surface. So these wounds that we have on our lives, the effects of those things will eventually surface in our lives. They'll show up in passive aggression, or they'll show up in these different things. And so we tend to try to help people to deal with stuff at the surface level. But what we have to do is follow the wounds, follow the bubbles down to where the puncture's at, replace that void with Christ and healing, and we eliminate the bubbles.
Golly.
Chewy.
So we're
Probably
developing
good stuff.
tools that will help people follow the bubbles down to where the original wound is at. And we spend all of our time, and I'm not throwing rocks at anything that we do, but we spend a lot of time ministering to the adult versions of the people that are standing in front of us, when it's the wounded version that they're still carrying that needs to be ministered to.
Well, what's funny is when Chris said that about fruit to root, Chris, when he was talking about, we get a lot of our identity from preaching a good sermon,
Sure.
and, whatever, but then we feel really cruddy when we feel like, golly, that stunk. And what's funny is, okay, so what's going on there? Well, I didn't see the response I thought I'd see, or I didn't feel like I felt like I was stumbling, which is why I felt like I've had a good word from the Lord before, and the people weren't responding well, which felt like I was pushing against, like, come on, guys, just get this. But what's funny is fruit to root is what you're talking about, following the bubbles, is really is actually finding a root of unbelief, which is that my identity actually comes from my sovereign, benevolent Heavenly Father, that my performance doesn't change what He thinks of me, but I know that my performance affects what those people sitting on the pews think of me. And so if over and over,
Believe it. You believe that,
and
here.
And if it dominates, that's it. If it dominates me at an intellectual, emotional, whatever level,
And it will.
then actually their opinion of me is more important than God's opinion of me. And that's an unbelief that really needs to get dealt with. And like you're saying, those bubbles may have generated when I was 10.
Yeah, you can follow them down. You can follow them down to some root, to some, I've got a tool I'm writing right now that is for this. It's specifically for tracing things down to that version of us that was wounded. And it's all connected, but like we take on these false beliefs that I am my performance, right? So I am my performance. And so we have all these truths up here. Like we have all these truths like that we teach and preach and all this other stuff up here and in the songs we sing. Man, if we believed a fifth of what we sang about, we wouldn't even be having these conversations. But we don't even believe the things that we teach, really. I'm sorry, but the right experiences, this right here is what navigates us. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? Yeah. This is what navigates us. So when we have experiences that move what we learned right here, 16 inches to right here, that's when the word and the things we teach are not something that we regurgitate in our minds to give us a pep talk to make it to Sunday again. But when it moves from here to here experientially, it becomes part of the DNA of who we are, and we navigate totally different because our belief system is different, and it's all connected to experience.
So hey, Randy, good. I want to ask you one more question. And we actually had somebody said, hey, let's just go ahead and go long today. But which, I mean,
Good thing you're not getting paid by the hour, right?
we never have an aversion to that. But so somebody said, and just going back to, and I almost would like to hear you summarize, and Chris, whatever you may have here, but I'd almost like to hear, like, okay, so what should you do? I think maybe at some point we should finish with literally not just, okay, so here's some information, hope you liked it. Like I would hope that somehow today, by the time we're done, that something on the inside would of a person would say, okay, this is what I'm going to do as a result of what I've heard today. So I'm throwing that out to you, just as a little, like, I'm teeing it up for maybe a way that we could conclude today.
We're good,
but
we can do that.
Somebody made a comment and said, I was a cokehead. I can't explain what happened. It was supernatural. My desire for the drug was instantly cured at the altar. It was Jesus. He was my cure. Thank God. Okay. I believe that can happen.
I can talk about that if you want me to.
Would you?
Yeah, I think that's where you're kind of pulling me along to. So here's the thing. I'm not going to judge anybody's singular experience. Okay. All I can tell you is what I feel like I've observed. Number one, I believe the delivering power of God, that God can do whatever God wants to do. I believe, yeah. I know God can do whatever he wants to do. And God could touch somebody in a moment's time and change all that stuff. He put the plasticity in our brain, the ability, he could do all that. And I know he does do that sometimes, but that's not what I've witnessed most of my ministry. What I've witnessed most of my ministry is, like, there's a degree of change, like with a lot of the people with addictions that I've worked with, is like, I've seen people get touched by God. And what it seems like I've seen happen is I've seen God miraculously remove the physical part of their addiction. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen other ways, but the physical part of their addiction is healed and lifted from their body. But most of the time, what I feel like I've seen is that the things that were originally there that were driving addiction, God intends to heal through relationship with him and others. That's why discipleship's so important. Okay, so the physical part. I never wanted to use cocaine again, but I gained 700 pounds because I've been eating instead of using cocaine, right? So
bro, that's our mom's story, right? Mom came into church, God did an amazing work, delivered her from cigarettes and drinking and whatever, and replaced that with basically a food addiction. So that's so true. And I love that. I think that, we're just, like, we believe God can do miraculous things in any place of our lives. But what we also know, it's not either or, it's both and, right? So we're going to believe God can, but he also uses process. Sometimes he doesn't do that immediately, and you go through a process. Whether he does it immediately or he does it over time, the reality is all of us need that process to work on the places in us that made us vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is that made us vulnerable to need something other than Jesus, we need the process of time for him to come and replace that. I think that's one of the things as Pentecostals, I think sometimes we wrestle with and we struggle with, because we believe it so much. And it feels like if we say, yes, but I know he can instantly deliver, but that it almost sounds like a lack of faith. And it's really just an expression of, no, we believe in the supernatural sovereign power of God to do what you said, to remove that, but it doesn't remove the need for the process to transform and change us.
Yeah. So I'm gonna bring criticism on me and not bring criticism on the Dillinghams group. Okay. So if I say something that's very critical and whatever, you guys just shake your head. Oh, no. And that'll get you off the hook. So, but if you have a strict belief that that's the way it has to happen, and that's the way it's going to happen, we come in alignment with things and strongly believe them when it benefits us, right? So if I don't have another way to help somebody, if I don't have another way to walk people through, and maybe God wants to equip me, but I'm not willing to take that path, or for whatever reason I don't seek that path out, or whatever, I've almost got to tell myself that, to live with myself, because then it's their fault if they don't get it, because they didn't connect to God, or this didn't happen in this supernatural way. And that's really not on me to do anything else to help them along the way. That's just, okay, that's the way it happens, and that's the way it is. But the whole thing of, yes, God can do that, and God may know what is necessary to help that person. God knows what is necessary to help that person. But what makes sense to me is that God manifested in the flesh, and he died on the cross to restore relationship with me, because that broke intimacy with God. Yeah. Sin broke intimacy with God, and he took on the cross, and he took that on to restore relationship. So if he wants relationship with me, does it make more sense that healing would come through a drive-up window that was like, hey, give me a number 4 deliverance, supersize it because I'm in really bad shape? Or would it be more like a long-term intimate dining experience? Right. Where I was healed over time in relationship with him and the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. And in a relationship with the body of Christ, that healing would come experientially through that. Makes more sense.
That's so good, because really from a counseling perspective, one of the things that you would do in a situation like that is you would affirm that. You would say, like you did, you just did that. You affirmed it. You said, I totally believe God is big enough and powerful enough to do that. Yeah. But then the question becomes, all right, so that's amazing. Thank God for that. How did that build your faith? How did that help you now start deal with all of the fractures in your soul and the various other places that were broken from the things? How did God's delivering power? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how God's delivering power, God doing that miracle for you, started helping you believe that God was going to help you now with all of these places of brokenness in these other areas. Like that would be it's kind of what you did. And that's kind of like the counseling approach to sort of affirming that, but then saying, and then turning that back around and say, now, okay, so now here's what we can expect. We can expect that people could come to an altar and receive exactly what you did. Some may not. They may deal with it over a longer period of time. At the end of the day, complete healing and wholeness is a lifelong process. So let's teach people how to experience the supernatural and to get complete healing.
Yeah. I mean, if it all happened in one shot, and I mean, we have deliverances and all that other stuff. If it all happened in one shot, we wouldn't need Dave Ramsey, because all of our financial skills would be healed, boom, when we got that one shot. But we have all these other areas of life skills and everything else that we still teach people. Why? Because it doesn't all happen in one shot.
That's right.
I mean, people do get instantaneous deliverance. Here's the problem that I've seen with pastors, church leaders, soul winners. They only can relate to the experience that they had.
Yes.
That's where our story becomes dangerous, because I've dealt with a lot of people that got instantaneous, quote unquote, instantaneous delivery, whatever that is. Very thorough in some cases, maybe not so thorough in other cases. And when they have somebody come to their church and they come in a powerful service, they get the Holy Ghost and they relapse, we always judge the things we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to hit it with the judgment, whether expressed or not. Well, they don't want it bad enough, or they don't love God, or that wasn't a real experience, or whatever. Why? Because when they did it, they left drugs, alcohol, cussing, Twinkies, everything behind. But when somebody else did it, they had some relapse involved in it, and so, well, that must not have been real. So we can't just see it through the lens of what our experience was. I feel like we have to open up and say, hey, look, I can embrace your experience, but here's something else that we've seen that's brought a lot of healing very experientially and very Bible based. I mean, everything we do is based on biblical principles using biblical stories.
Man, so good. So much goodness in this podcast, man. We could literally go on for easily another couple of hours and just continue to do this, but I know you got stuff going on. So I want you to do us a favor. Tell us quickly a little bit about Navigate Ministries, what you've got going on. Of course, we've had Les on here, and we talked about his experience at Lifeline, and we've talked about Lifeline Connect and the great work that's happening there. Amazing thing, like the community connection, the way that's opened up opportunities to reach in the community, because this is a universal issue, right? People dealing with addictions and whatever, and that's amazing. So we've kind of addressed that point, and obviously you've been a central figure in developing that ministry and all that. But now you've got Navigate Ministries. Tell us a little bit about what that is, and you got some exciting things. Just launched some training that's filled up, like, man, amazing. So you've got that going on right now. So tell us what Navigate Ministries is, how people can access it, and maybe some things that you've got coming up in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So, and Chris, like, you and your church was an integral part of this transition. Prior to Lisa's death, it's probably 8 or 9 years ago now. Prior to Lisa's death, like, a lot of the focus was on addictions ministry, like, and not even really fully recognizing that all of us have heart problems, and the things that are using to help heal addicts is what God intends to heal the church as well, so we can be more connected to him and experience more deliverance and all this other stuff. And so it was not too long after Lisa passed away, and you had asked me to come and speak at your church. And I got there in the afternoon on Saturday afternoon, and you said, "Hey, look, we like to have our first interaction with the church. The first service is first things or something like that."
First things, yeah. First
Okay,
things.
it's first things, and we sit on a couple stools, and I'm going to ask you questions, and you just respond to the questions. I said, "Okay, I'd love to do that," or whatever. And you said, you kind of paused, and you said, "Well, what people really want to talk about is you losing your wife. People won't talk about what they want to hear about is, you walking through that experience of the loss of a 31-year spouse." And I'm like, a little pause, and I said, "Okay." And then my other condition was, "But just don't tell me ahead of time what the questions are going to be."
Yeah.
And my reason was, I didn't want to prepare mentally for any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I was as interested as everybody else what would come out.
That's awesome.
Because I was like, okay, I just want this, open it up. I am like as interested as everybody else at what's going to come out,
Yeah.
And so God led your questions. What came out must have been somewhat effective, because I kept getting all kinds of interactions from people that were saying, "Wow, this spoke to me like this spoke to me like that," and blah, blah, blah. And people asking if I could come and speak at their church and different things. And so this shift and door opening up as those opportunities opened up, that, hey, look, the church, the body of Christ needs emotional wellness. And we need this to, interface with life, and to interface with people, and interface with God, and to interface with authority, and all this other stuff. So it shifted right there. And so then came back home and tried to bring recovery ministry more into not about drugs and alcohol, but the whole community, the whole church. When I wrote the Navigate material, I told the editor, I said, if I ever accidentally put the word recovery in the material, take it out. I don't have a problem with it, but everybody that sees it thinks it's drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. And so moving away from that. And so then we started restructuring our recovery meetings a lot, and still do small groups. And that's all part of that, and the Navigate training and stuff like that. But so started replacing the material that we were using with all these experiences and lessons and thoughts from God that was moving things from here to here, and the things that God used to heal me. Because, I didn't even want to be alive anymore. I did not even want to participate in life anymore. And so there's been so many things that have happened that God has had to help me directly. It had to be vertical, because I didn't have a resource horizontally for a lot of the things that God needed to do. And so just started sharing thoughts and teaching lessons that pertain to those types of things. And people started receiving and getting healing. And people from other churches started traveling in and listening to the lessons. And then they said, "Hey, look, we want to take this back to our church." So I'd get done teaching. I just hand them my notes. I was like, "Okay, go teach it." And hand them my notes. And so then Pastor Rogers said, "You need to start writing. He's been telling me that for a while, and so I just gutted it out and wrote the first book, and then followed it up with another one. And then it just started taking off. I mean, it's just like, it just took off. And, my daughter had somebody stop her a few months ago and say, hey, tell your dad that that material is getting used in Africa. We're using it in a women's trafficking ministry in
What?
Africa, and just like
Bro.
things like that happening. And so now, a dream is being fulfilled that I told God when I was in my mid 40s. And I was walking down by the Salt Fork River and I said, God, this is what I would like to do. If it lines up with your will, I would like to help people, but I'd also like to help people help people.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I didn't know is that it was going to happen at the same time in the same sessions.
That's so good. That's awesome. Man.
So what if, how powerful is it? Is not just my past, is the power, is not just, that's not the only powerful story that I tell, but I also talk about, that healing experience, when God healed my heart.
Yeah.
And then they walk away and they share that healing experience and they can help people duplicate that healing experience in their lives. And then they have that healing story to tell, to follow up their story of deliverance and God touching their life.
Man, that's awesome. And it's such a needful thing. It is absolutely such a needful thing. And I love what's happening in the body of Christ, the recognition to, like, I think sometimes we swing on the pendulum. We don't need to minimize the power of the Holy Ghost, the working of his Spirit. We need that. And I think one of the underrated things that you said today is that the cross, the out of balance with the cross, the vertical versus the horizontal is such a great principle. We can't ever lose sight of that. And I think sometimes we can swing on the pendulum either way. And what we need is what you said. We can't do
balance.
This without we can't do this without his Spirit. We got to come right back to the center of the truth. And that is, we need his Spirit, but we also need what you're talking about, right? Which is discipleship. This is why it's marriage.
That's
together.
What makes Lifeline effective it's discipling people through their wounds, discipling people through their hurts. And the navigating material is not going to heal anybody.
Yeah.
But, I had a shoulder injury one time and I couldn't get over it. I finally had physical therapy and they sent me home with, of all things, rubber bands.
Yeah.
So they sent me home with rubber bands. They hook it to the doorknob and do this, and do this and do this. And I went home and I'm like, this is stupid. This does not make sense to me. Rubber bands doing this does not make sense to me. Lo and behold, of 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, I started feeling a lot better, and I did it for 6 weeks, and I didn't have any pain in my shoulder. And I didn't go and start telling people, man, you need some rubber bands because these rubber bands healed me.
Right.
Well, what it was is those rubber bands activated and directed the healing that God already put in my body.
That's powerful.
And so the material won't heal anybody, but it can direct and activate through motion and experience the healing that God's already put in our minds. It's called the plasticity of the brain, the ability of it to heal and change.
That's so powerful. So good, man. Really appreciate you being on today. If people are interested, they can go to navigateministries.org.
Yep.
You're on Facebook, I know, as well. You can check that out. Also, I think your personal Facebook, Randy Brown, Suzanne Brown, on Facebook as well. You definitely want to check this out. There's some training that's happening, that's coming up.
Hit the resources tab, like Navigate 1, 2, Relapse Tool, all great stuff.
There's videos. There's all kinds of stuff there that people are going to want to take advantage of. And I would just encourage people, man, sign up for the training, come and be a part of that. And it will absolutely bless you because, the conversation we had the other day, Randy, you said tools in the tool belt, more like practical tools, giving people practical tools that they can apply in those situations is so important.
Right.
So, man, so good today, bro. Thank you for.
If you can encourage people to sign up for the newsletter, because things are going to be changing fast and we can keep them informed of the new trainings and the new resources and stuff like that. So if they sign up for that newsletter, that would help them.
There you go. All right. We'll make sure we include that when we promote this out there. So I'll just say to people that we're on today, man, tell people about this because people need to hear this conversation. We're getting a lot of feedback already. So thank you, Randy,
Thank you guys for letting me be on.
Yeah. Carving out a lot of time today.
I enjoyed it.
Went a lot longer than we anticipated, but I think obviously by the attendance still going strong. So I will make one just real quick announcement. Ken, you mentioned this Saturday. People can be praying for us Friday and Saturday. We're going to be speaking at Winter Fire Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. We're going to be doing a live podcast at Winter Fire. And so that will be available on Facebook and YouTube is what I believe is going to happen. We'll put some information out about that and get that out there to you.
Our live audience will be the conference attenders. The conference audience will be our live audience that day.
Absolutely. And we'd love to have you join us online as well. So thank you for joining us for this awesome conversation today. We look forward to